The views shared in this episode represent Kelly and Kendra, not our mamas, partners, church, job, or sponsors. Hey everyone, it's Kendra. Before we get started, a quick note. This episode is part one of our rich conversation with Dr. Tahirah Walker, author of Rhetoric, Intersectionality, and Black Women in Pittsburgh. In this first half, we get into her journey and talk about faith, womanism, and what it means to hold both rigor and care as a Black woman in academia. But trust me, you'll want to stay tuned for part two next week, when we dig deeper into her book and the power of reclaiming our stories. I hope you enjoy it. And you know, Kelly, that Dr. Walker knows Dr. Tate, because besides the fact that she graduated from the program, one of the students in the program started a podcast, and Leah is producing it as well.
I love it.
Mm-hmm. So it's all in the family here.
Awesome. And I know you're at Point Park. Did you also graduate from Point Park?
I didn't. So I went to Duquesne for my doctoral degree, where there were 0 women of color, 0 people. Yeah.
My!
In your program, yeah, that's crazy.
And doing the teaching, and there was one other Black woman who we actually ended up graduating together. She came in the cohort after me, but and I thank God for this, right? We ended up just kind of clicking and being like, we should do this together. But yeah, that was quite an experience. I think one good thing about it, though, is that I'm hyper aware of what that feels like for my students now.
Yeah.
So the other day, I figured out that I am the only Black woman they can ask to chair a dissertation. The only, that's it, right? And thinking about that just, opened this world for me. I was like, oh, okay, so I have several jobs. First of all, that can't continue.
Yeah.
that has to change. But, I really just, first of all, need to make sure that they understand that I get it. I get what that feels like. So, yeah.
Ooh,
but
you
asked me, did I go here? And I went all the way down it, right?
Oh, yeah. Kelly can talk to you about it.
Yes.
Kelly.
Where were you?
Finish. I was at UCLA. And the person I started with was a Black woman, and she wasn't respected. And so then I had to find a new advisor. It was just bad from the time I got there.
Wow.
And so, yep, I'm good old ABD. ABD.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Okay. Well, I hear a ribbon being tied as you say that.
No, it's that Black girl. That Black girl guilt. That's what that is. It's not that I actually need the degree.
You can hear a series of ancestors seasoning chicken on one side and out the other side of their mouth saying, so girl, when are you gonna wrap up that degree? Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, they're lucky to have you for sure.
For sure. I was like, of course she comes after we done. But you know what? It was for such a time as this.
Them new children need it different than Kendra and the Divine 7 needed it. Let me say that. I'm sorry. Heavenly 7.
We're gonna get it right. Yeah.
They need it different.
It's true.
I think so. And I think there are certain things that I wonder if they have just decided to accept. That I don't know. I'm going to assume that I'm among fellow Gen Xers.
Yes, you are.
Oh, you are. We're both older than you.
Oh, okay. But when you grow up with a bunch of Keishas, you know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's a little different. Not that I think that there are generational things, but there's also just even for this program, certain things that I noticed that people are just like, oh, that's okay, and I'm like, well, why? Why is it, like, no, we can speak up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they also, a lot of them, I coach a chair of a OB department, Black woman, and
Mm.
she was just saying how unprepared her scholars are. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they went to med school in the pandemic, like start, stop, online, in person, like I think we've underestimated the impact that it's had on people in terms of grasping content and getting the support that they need for difficult concepts. And then just how people have struggled with their mental health coming out of that pandemic.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, big time. Yeah. It's also the age of, like, the 2-minute reel.
Trust me.
And so I'm like, look, I didn't bring my top hat and cane today. Okay, we're gonna get through this.
Right.
And I promise you, at the end of the hour or whatever, the people who make all of this money from your scrolling will still be rich. Yeah, they will. They'll get their money. Don't you worry. But that's, yeah, I think another thing that we had to be able to do. Can you imagine not knowing how to entertain yourself for more than a few minutes without like a device, right?
Gen
No,
Xers,
you
we
can't.
would have been in big trouble because we were at home.
Can you imagine? We were at home with nobody for hours.
Yes, and many times no
one.
cable. We still had the antennas with the foil trying to get the best
Right.
signal. Yes,
And you knew how to do it
we
too.
did.
Right? Like, yeah, you knew which way to turn it, what window was best, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna.
I never thought that I would be like this type of nostalgia reminiscent
We all become
woman.
boomers. We all become boomers. It's
okay, because I'm like, oh, what am I saying?
Yeah, we
I
all
rebuke
become
that
boomers.
in the name of Jesus.
Yeah, no. We all become boomers. It's part of the course. But what's crazy is, I feel like the boomers are struggling with a lot of what the Gen Zers are struggling with. That's a whole nother story. Because my mom addicted to Facebook, kind of low key. My dad on YouTube all day. But I was gonna say, even for myself, I finished. I've defended my dissertation in 2020 in the pandemic. And after that, I said, okay, I'm gonna give my brain a break. I'm not gonna read. And I have struggled to get back in the game. Like, I'm trying to work on a academic article of my dissertation, and my attention span is not what it used to be either. I struggle with, deep reading, the way that I wasn't a ferocious reader. I remember during my second grad program, I didn't even watch TV for like a year. Like, I was like that. And it's been a struggle for me. So I have empathy, but it makes me very sad to see. Yeah. And I can't imagine what I left full-time teaching in 2021. I can't imagine what it would be like to go back in now. Yeah. Although I have a desire for it, it scares me.
Come on, whenever you're ready.
Looks like you'd have a gig if you wanted it, Dr. Ross.
Yep.
Now, before we get deep into our questions, one thing I did want to say, since we're on this topic with Dr. Walker in Point Park, and a difference that I can see as someone who has served on a committee and someone who has been around and witnessed you in action, is, there's just a special touch that Black women bring to academia that I just don't, other people just generally don't have. Although I will say the person who else came close to it for me was Dr. Sarah Matthew, who, as you know, went to Pitt, was like, to both have like this deep empathy and care, but also the help with the rigor that I don't see, and I haven't seen when I was at Point Park. There was one other professor that was in the department who came briefly, who had all the rigor, but her disposition and her lack of empathy, and actually just like snobbyish approach, looking down on people, turned me off. But I was also turned off by the people who's like, go ahead, turn something raggedy. We just, we got numbers to fill, to see that Dr. Walker is like, I'm going to care for you. But I have, not only do I have to put my name on this, the bigger thing is I want you to feel good about this. And, I feel like, you and Dr. Matthew, I see the two of you, even though I'm no longer in program, as I'm trying to get to this next phase of like writing article in writing a book. I see the two of you as a model for that, of like, we can push people to do better, but we can still like offer love and care in the way we do it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I think that, that's the old like transaction model mm-hmm. stuff coming back to haunt you. And I think also, just recognizing that though I don't want this to be true, it is true that for so many of us, you're working 2-3 times as hard mm-hmm. to get half as much.
Yeah.
I don't want people to be fooled, into thinking that like, academia is a space where they can kind of rest on their laurels. But also that like, especially depending on what topic you're working on, there are especially Black women who worked so hard to uncover the things they do. Mm-hmm. Right? Like if I have somebody who's studying Harriet Tubman, for instance, right? Like, and I know the kind of work Dr. Etta Fields Black did mm-hmm. on her book about her, like that is a magnum opus.
Like a lifetime, like, decades.
Right. There's no way I'm going to let somebody, play in my face, as they say, right? Yeah. Like, no, we're going to honor what she started here. And I do believe that the ending of a thing is in its beginning. So if you start out, just being haphazard, and that's what you end up with, yeah. I don't want that for them.
And speaking of that, we want to honor her. We'll put that in the show notes. She is a local Pittsburgh professor who won the Pulitzer Prize this year, Black woman. So we want to honor her, Dr. Etta Blackfields. Yes. And so I also want to call out, before we move on, Dr. Jamesina Talbot, who was my chair and who was the only Black woman professor at Point Park at one point. She was the only full Black woman professor, I think, ever. And she was my chair, and she was literally dealing with advanced stages of cancer as she was ushering me and a bunch of other people through the program. So that's how much she gave, not only of herself intellectually, but her physical body to this. And so I have to honor her, and as we talk about that, and the rigor and the care and love that she brought to me and so many others.
Yeah.
All right. Ooh. Kelly, you want to get us kicked off?
Yeah, if you take me to the emo place. Dr. Walker, first of all, thank you for being with us today. We would love for you to introduce yourself, and what is your connection to womanism?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you a Black woman in middle management looking to elevate your leadership skills in a safe space? Then listen up, because I have something special just for you. Join a coaching group of like-minded women focusing on emotional intelligence, management skills, and leading in white spaces. In our group coaching sessions, you'll gain leadership skills, tools, and strategies. Plus, you'll gain a powerful network of sisters who understand your journey. No more leaning alone. Ready to take the next step? Visit www.iamkelly to learn more and join a cohort. Let's lead together.
Oh, I love that question. So introduce myself. I'm Tahirah Walker. I am almost 50. I'll be 50 in March. Yeah. And I have worked in higher education now for just over 20 years. Before this, I was doing all kinds of interesting travel, doing work that I thought was really more about community organizing. And so, before moving to Pittsburgh, I was doing that in Haiti. And I think if I'm honest, that is likely where I met, sort of developed a personal relationship with what I knew as womanism, but didn't have, real grounded experience. So my relationship to womanism, I think I start with maybe a lot of people where it was like, oh, I love the color purple. Let me get a little bit more into Alice Walker. What is she talking about? And I remember just sort of carrying her message about feminism and womanism being, like lavender and purple. And I was just like, that it sounds interesting, but what does it mean in real life? And I don't think I knew at the time that a lot of that is about aging and experience, and needing to teach yourself the difference between surviving and thriving, right? Like, I think, even that is a distinction. But one of the things that I learned quickly when I was living in Haiti was that you really don't do anything that is truly liberating without it being communal. Didn't matter what it was, like, and so I can tell you, like, that was something I started to get, where I was just like, oh, okay, whatever it is, these folks have decided that I'm part of them. And they've claimed me. And so I don't get to hide. I don't get to go like isolate myself. I don't get to, like, if there was something going on, it was like, oh no, you come here. We need to show you this. We need to show you how the cistern works so that if you need to get water, you can come here and do it yourself. We're going out to the market. We're going as a group, right? Like, yeah. And I think that I knew that in some ways growing up. I grew up in Newark, but being in Haiti, living in the countryside, I got like a really much more, a much deeper relationship to all of those concepts when it came to living in the natural world.
Yeah.
And I, in a way that I didn't before, like, I think going from being a kid who came in when the street light came on, and having to be trusted to do that, whether anybody was home or not,
Yeah.
to, living in this rural setting where, the birds were the first ones up, but then after that, we all got up together and started, like, as a unit, moving through what we needed to do to get through the day. Sometimes because there's only a certain amount of daylight that you're going to get, right? And you need to use that. So I think it connected me to more of the natural world, and in that way connected me to other women and our specific needs, that was, on a real much more visceral level. So I think that that's probably where, and the pinnacle of that was I had my first child while I was living in Haiti. And it's such a funny experience. Like, my mom came, and she was like, I've never been
Your mom was like,
around
you need to
anything
be
like
in Newark.
She was like, there are chickens running through the courtyard of this hospital. I was just like, yes, we are in the country, right? And we are in the country in a place where, we don't use resources unless we absolutely have to. So yes, people raise chickens, and we, it's fine. But the thing that really got her was when, I was laboring, and then when it was time, um, the midwife sort of like went off in the back and announced to all of my coworkers. It was a hospital I worked at, right? She goes off and she's like, okay, baby's coming. And they were standing behind like the divider, you're in an emergency room. There's people on the other side, right? They were standing behind there. And when that baby came out, all of a sudden it just erupted. Hey, like, like when the plane lands, right? And I remember my mom looked at me and was just like, like, I know. But that to me, that's womanism, It's just like, no, this is an us thing, right? Like, we all are dealing with this. Such an amazing experience there.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I didn't know that story,
Yeah.
So that was lovely to hear.
I can visualize.
Yeah, me too. I'm like, you took me back there. We want to talk to you obviously about your work and your book, but we are a podcast about many things, but deeply rooted in like our spiritual journeys and what we call being recovering church girls, which we can get into.
Yes.
I know you have a different like spiritual trajectory in the way you were raised. So I just want to talk about that for a second, about just to ground the conversation and like where do you enter into the conversation around spirituality, and you know what does spirituality mean to you today as well?
Wow. Yeah, I do know that about the podcast, and I'm a fan of um, a couple of books that I think kind of put me in that conversation too. One, a book that's called The Day God Saw Me as Black, which I really just love. And then, of course, Disha Philial's Secret Lives of Church Ladies. Yeah. Um, so right when I was born, my mom was in the Nation of Islam. She had been sort of into like political action that drew her there. And then she kind of slowly drifted from that. And I can remember as a little kid, her trying to figure out, where she belonged. So she came from a, very typical Black, a great migration family who, were deep in Baptist churches, and decided for herself to recommit to Islam. And probably around the time that I was 9, um, she became a practicing Sunni Muslim. So these are the, bean pie making, 5 times a day praying, uh, don't let nobody see your butt, like, and so I think for most of my upbringing, spirituality was really based in rules and rituals. And, that was my sense of what it meant to have a higher power, what it meant to be spiritually accountable. Um, and it was challenging. I definitely know that there were times where I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. Like, the boys don't have to cover their hair. Why am I doing that? And there's certain rituals even that we didn't participate in. Like if you're menstruating, if you're on your period, you don't actually do the regular prayers. And in some households, you wouldn't even touch the Quran, the holy book, right? So like imagine you're on your period and they tell you, oh, don't touch the Bible, right? Like, so I had this relationship where I was just like, I'm skeptical because I feel like I'm being punished, and I'm not even being punished for the things I did. Like I had this like running list in my head, right? Yeah, where I was just like, yeah, I probably owe God something for that, right? Like that thing I did, that was wrong. I shouldn't have stole that candy or whatever. But the things that I was having to pay for, so to speak, were things that I didn't feel like I should have been. And so when it was time for me to leave my mother's home, one of the first things I did was to say, you know what, I'm not interested in any of that. I'm just, I did not have a relationship that was spiritual with anyone or anything.
How did your mom handle that?
This was very difficult. It was really, really hard for her. And one of the more painful things that happened was that, there were years later, there were times where, I was dealing with like mental health issues or, just being really under a lot of pressure. And the sort of refrain was, well, if you would just mix a lot, like I'm sure that, for church girls, this sounds a lot like you need Jesus. You need to come to service, right? Yeah. So I am married to a man who grew up in church, with uncles and a father who are all ministers. So I am aware of what it is like. But yeah, for me, it was very much that. And I think my mom wanted to see me have a spiritual structure,
Yeah.
but she didn't necessarily love spiritual questioning, you know. So
Mm.
you know, there might be things I would say like, okay, well, but you know, what does this particular verse about extending each other truth and patience, like what do those things look like to you? And my mom would be like, yeah, we pray at 5. So you know,
Get that look.
yeah. And it wasn't, it's not that my mother wasn't a deep person, but I just think that she was far more interested in practicalities. She was more interested in the side of this that was about keeping things in order. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And making people have responsibilities, um, than she was in just like what is the meaning of justice, or what does what does that look like for our grandchildren? That wasn't necessarily something that I think we talked about. And when it came to you know, living in spirituality as a woman, we had many conversations about her sort of disdain for feminism. Um,
Mm.
yeah, where we'd be like, that's not what we do over here. And yet there were certain things I would ask her about. I'd be like, well, but do you think that, you know, you should have the ability to earn and spend your money however you want to? And she'd be like, oh, well, yes, absolutely. The prophet taught that, and then fill in the blank with like some
Yeah.
very black feminist principles. And so, you know, it's interesting. So I think what ended up happening is that I felt, as a younger adult, that I needed to come back to a sense of spirituality, to keep my life from feeling out of control, really.
Yeah.
Uh, and I had a difficult time trying to figure out where exactly I belong. I am blessed, though, in that I have a lot of friends and family who are deeply rooted in their faith communities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, you know, I've been able to enjoy a variety of things. But, you know, even today at 49, there are days where I wake up and I'm still like, yeah, I want to think about what serving a higher power, a higher purpose means to me
Mm. Yeah.
without, you know, it having to be about keeping me in line.
Mm-hmm.
The dogma of it all.
Yeah.
The dogma of it all. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious. I know we want to get to the book, but I'm really curious. Growing up in Newark, so you were a city girl.
Hmm.
Um, how did other Black Americans, right? So there's this assumption that if you are Black, your spiritual tradition in the United States is Christianity. And we don't talk about Black Muslims of various traditions. What was that experience like for you as a woman?
Yeah, so in growing up in Newark, that was not an assumption. It wasn't something that I recognized as a common assumption until I left, right? Like I
Interesting. Yeah.
especially being in Pittsburgh, where I was like, oh, you just think all the Black people, oh yeah, no. And yeah, growing up in Newark, you had you know, people who were Hebrew Israelites, you had
Mm-hmm.
Muslims, you had you know, we would have, but especially because there's a large Black Caribbean and South American population, you have Black folks who were part of the Catholic Church and not, you know, going to Baptist
And
church, but also,
Moravian. I dated somebody whose mom. I was like, I had never even heard of such a thing.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think that we had those assumptions, and I certainly I am acutely aware that my teachers, for example, knew that I was Muslim. Yeah, they were aware. You know, this is a place where Amiri Baraka was creating. Yeah, so we didn't have that experience, and it was funny because as a kid, I can remember other kids who did not have Muslim parents, they would come up with Arabic names for themselves, like alternative names.
Love it.
And yeah, and it was like, they were playing Muslim.
Right. I was gonna say I associate Newark, New Jersey with Black Muslims. Just because of the history, and you can even drive. You could, when I was younger, especially, you would drive through the community, and you would see the presence like very starkly. Now, so it's just interesting, the differences. It's funny that you say that about the assumptions made in Pittsburgh. I remember when I started our doctoral program at Point Park, and like as you know, half of our cohort were Black women, and they would freely talk about faith in class discussions. We even had a professor that would talk about it. And even though I come from church, academically, I come from theory. Most faith never even comes up in the conversation type background. And I have to say, I felt uncomfortable in class when faith was brought up so much. And then I felt uncomfortable not only for myself, but for other people, thinking, what if this is not part of their faith tradition? But in Pittsburgh, and even at a school like Point Park, because Pittsburgh is a very religious city, which I didn't recognize until I was much older, that like people feel like they can just move, like, and to the point where like even in my comps, I wrote about Jesus from a more historical Jesus, but I wrote about Jesus in my comps in a way I would have never done in my last graduate program, just because it was so common to talk about religion and faith in the classroom. And I had never experienced that.
Yeah, it absolutely. It is true that you see that. And even it's just part of like the normal lexicon, the normal way of people talking. The underlying assumption, is, that you are talking about a monotheistic representation of faith, even if even if you're talking about Jesus, right? Like I think there's a certain way that African American Muslims in Pittsburgh talk about Jesus that is rooted a little bit differently than what I was used to growing up. A little bit more. I don't know if reverence is the right word, but it's different. So I've definitely noticed that. I remember one of my first doctor's appointments here. The people said to me, "Oh, well, do you want us to pray for you?" And I was just like, like, no, I want you to show me your MD. Let's get the skills. Where's the medicine? And I remember thinking like, wow, that's like, they feel comfortable openly saying that, whereas back home that would have never, not something that I would have expected.
Yeah, Pittsburgh is a different place. I had a gynecologist pray for me one time. I was like, whoa.
Right.
Anyway, I want to move off of spirituality and just ground your spirit to say, what is feeding your spirit right now?
Ooh. What is feeding my spirit right now? Wow. I think that something that I'm trying to do is a practice of radical honesty.
Tell me more.
It's difficult, but it's like I get to the other side of doing that with someone that I'm in one kind of relationship or another, and I feel so incredibly full and like ready for what's next. And I won't say like, oh yes, I've been lying all my life, but I do think that I've been doing a certain amount of masking that I've just normalized. Like certain things you just don't say to people. You just don't offer all of your feedback. And I don't know that it's always been that way, but somewhere like along the journey of life, I learned to take up less space in honesty. So one of the ways that this comes out, so I was talking to my daughters, and there are places where I would normally have been like, this is where you just let her go off, right? Or them, together. And I just am not doing that, as difficult as it may be, right? So, as an example, my middle daughter and I had a long conversation the other night. She is living in Washington, D.C. And her experience of the world around her is very different. Just the physical environment is very different from what I'm dealing with. She goes outside. There are National Guards, people walking around with big guns. And, she has to think every day, right? Like, is this the day where someone takes me and I have to prove myself a citizen, So we're having this conversation, and I'm listening to her, and I just started getting real open about my fears and some of the things that I've experienced, things that I would not normally, have said to her. Like in this case, I was telling her how I was at an event this past week in Pittsburgh, and someone who is an acquaintance of mine, a white man who works as a security guard, thought that it was funny to come up behind me and hold my arms and say, "Okay, I'm taking you away now. This is ICE." Yeah, yeah. And I turned around, and I'm like, "Oh," but I'm telling my daughter this, and this is the kind of thing that I probably would have, tried to protect her from.
Right.
I probably, I wouldn't want her to be thinking about, but instead, part of me is just like, no, she lives in a place where I need her to be prepared for this possibility. I also have a lot more honest conversations around menopause.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to tell you, right? Like I was talking to a group of people who we were about to like go on a stage and do a reading and discussion with each other. And I just looked at them both and was like, so it's been a rough morning. Like I'm losing my hair. Started saying all these things and they're looking like, you know, and I was just like, yeah. And I realized that being able to do that is about being willing to tell people what I need.
Yes.
And that is what makes it so filling because, oh my gosh, they might actually help. They might actually see you.
Yes.
And yeah. So that has been feeding my spirit. I'm also reading lots of novels, y'all. Like
Nice.
I'm like, I am one of those people who used to feel guilty. It's all the schooling. You're like, ooh, I need to read a history book, right?
Right.
I
Listen.
love a good trashy novel written by the middle-aged Black women.
Exactly. Right.
It's giving Kennedy Ryan.
That's exactly what it's giving.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. So, I love that too. For myself because there's sort of like a reclamation of girlhood in there somewhere that I think reading and listening to my records. It was always a place of freedom for me as a child, and so doing that now is really really helpful too. And then there's the food that I'm eating. Yeah, love eating.
As you should.
Welcome to 50. I love it for every Black woman because
she's already there. I'm on my way.
Yes, I'll be right behind you.
Yeah.
There is a level of freedom that happened. Oprah said it years ago, but I wasn't there, right? I was in my 30s. But each decade, I just feel a different level of freedom and truth telling to myself and to others than I did the decade before. So I'm happy for you and for your daughters that you are able to give them, quite frankly, a level of honesty that my mother and her generation have struggled to give to me.
Mm-hmm. Don't even get me started. I'm finding out stuff out about my mom now. I'm like, girl. Anyway, you brought up radical honesty, and you brought up a kind of reclamation, and I feel like that's a perfect place for us to go to the book. And so we'd love to, before we start asking you questions about it, for you just to talk to us about your book, and then I guess in some ways your dissertation, what your research is about, and where you enter the conversation with this text.
So I didn't know that I would write an academic text at all. I thought that if I wrote something, it would be more, sort of like essay driven, or even, maybe poetry, maybe fiction. So yeah, I kind of was like, I got a note from this acquisitions editor who was familiar with my dissertation. And I think there was like an appetite for anything intersectionality. And so, it was just like, ooh, what can we do here? And at that time, so I wrote my dissertation right after the unexpected death of my mother. And I don't think that there's any other piece of writing that I have put together that has been as much of a haze. Like I think that I was writing with um, a real sort of like just moving through it sense, whereas I'm usually far more analytical, far more outline driven. I know what all the pieces are and where I want to put them. My dissertation wasn't like that. It was very much a product of my grief. And I had, thought that I would distance myself from it. And instead, I wanted to have this book be a way to get back into that, but frame the parts that I knew were like underlying me processing emotions. And so when I talked to the editor, I was like, yeah, I do want to do that. But I also want to include the subtext, right? So that when people read it, they understand, like, I wrote this part and I'm talking about silence. But what was really happening is I was dealing with many times where I felt like I had been silenced, or I felt like there were things I wanted to say to my mom that I never got to say. And so, I was just like, what if some of it is like, narrative? What if we just put it in italics and, go from there?
I love that about it.
Thank you.
I love that.
Oh, thank you. And I gotta say, like, I think there were probably other people at the company. It was an academic press. So I'm sure that there were other people who would have been like, that'd be my citations, like not so much. But when it went out for peer review, one of the main pieces of feedback that I got was that voice was really helpful in understanding where I was going theoretically. And so that I think is the most important part of my work, is for me to move away from this, sort of real false academic tradition of pretending you are not always baked into it, that what's going on for you in life. Right, exactly. Yeah, I really was using it to do that. This also happened to be the time where this sort of infamous now study was done in Pittsburgh of gender equity, gender and racial equity. Right? It was, and the first thing I noticed about this study is that they were saying that they had used an intersectional methodology. And I remember being like, what is that? Because as a person who had written a dissertation about intersectionality in its, the core concepts of it, I was like, what do they think that means? And it got far more interesting to me when I realized that the people who were the principal investigators were all white women of means too, right? And I was just like, intersectional methodology.
Mm-hmm.
What, like, define that for me. And I thought, oh, I could spend an entire book being ticked off about this study, or right, or I could talk about how I know Black women have always dealt with this and always found a way to reclaim that rhetorical space. And so that's what I chose to focus on. And I think my research agenda, if I have one, is always like coming back to joy and reclamation. What is that as a praxis? And the fact that it is important because it is central to our resistance. You can, your anger, your ire, your refutations can so easily be erased, but what you build cannot. Your joy, your celebration, your art, those things, those can't easily be undone. And so that's what I wanted to live in and what I wanted to, show more of.
Well, thank you for bringing it into the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think even Dr. Crenshaw would say her work has been co-opted by various elites and weaponized. I live in Houston, so in the South, a place where intersectionality has never been a part of our public curriculum. We actually now have laws that ban it, which it's such a waste of human resources and time, because I know my children never learned any of. They don't even know who Dr. Crenshaw was in high school because that was not a part of the curriculum. So thank you for naming and investing your grief into unpacking some of that for us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I think on the other side of that, was like so much love. I think it's funny because I'm like, is this the power of suggestion that you have love and freedom written behind you? And those are the things that I'm thinking of. I hope that it's really just the serendipity of who we are, right? But there was so much love in that. I got to think about my mother and what she tried to do for me while I created this document, and it just blew me away. Like I told you how I grew up in Newark. My mother was always extremely concerned with my education. Extremely. She didn't miss a parent teacher meeting, none of that. She was on top of it, right? And when it was time for me to go to high school, my mother she got this notion that I should go to high school in a different city. And so there was a town called Montclair nearby.
We love Montclair.
Yeah. And Montclair has one of the most, amazing school systems, right? My mom decided that's where she wanted me to go to high school. So what did this lady do? Again, like action oriented, very like put it in my hand type woman, right? So she goes and starts looking for a place to buy in Montclair,
which is very expensive,
right? And my mother was a single parent, she worked at the phone company. She did not have a college degree. And so, and mind you, she's doing this after she already owned a home in Newark. She owned a home that brought in 2 streams of rental income. So we lived on one floor. There were 2 other floors where people rented. And this was also, part of something she had built with her own mother. We could have easily stayed there and been extremely comfortable, No, she starts looking for another place. I did not understand Around this time, my father also came back into the picture. So, I'm watching my mother deal with this man and try to figure out my education. And she found this place. We lived in a condo that was a rehabbed old home. And we had to go to the back of the home to get to our section. We were going in the back door of this place to, like, Unit B is what it was called. Uh, and she did that just so that I had access to this amazing education. And I remember writing my dissertation and thinking specifically about home ownership for Black women, especially Black women who don't have any generational wealth, which is most of us. Right? Thinking about that and being like, wow, I can't imagine that my mom was like all of those resources, willing to put them on the line,
Yeah.
just so that, little things like me being able to walk to my high school instead of riding two public buses.
Yeah.
Knowing that, certain things were far less likely to happen to me. There were curricular assets I was going to get that I wouldn't have had. And this is not, a dig against the Newark public school system. It is more just like trying to shine a light on what my mother was trying to accomplish. Um, and it took me a long time to realize that for her, that was never about money. It didn't matter that she had to, put up extra money or take out this loan for this tiny condo. She wanted to know that I was going to go to a school where I was going to have teachers who valued Black culture, who were going to teach me about Dr. Betty Shabazz, right? Like those things were important to her. And for a long time, I thought, oh, this is important to her because I'm supposed to be successful, and not that like that part wasn't important, but it wasn't the primary reason. And writing the dissertation really drove that home for me. It was like, oh, this was the idea. The idea was that I would one day be writing about Dr. Kimberly Williams Crenshaw and the democratization of intersectionality. That like my mother would hear those words coming out of my mouth and be like, talk that talk. Like I know she would. And so I'm truly grateful for that. And I also, wanted to hold space for some of the other, sort of complicated things we had to go through. Yeah.
I really appreciate Black feminism for this very reason you're talking about, is how we can be honest about how we find ourselves in our work. Even though I didn't write from an autoethnographic point of view, although I plan to take what I've done and do that, because I was always in there, right, in my dissertation. But I love the way that you found yourself and learned more, not found yourself, but found out more about yourself and found out more about your relationship to your mother in writing about other women. And like that communal aspect, that familial aspect is always there. And I think about the work of like Dr. Venus Evan Winters and all these other women, like they present this as theory.
Yeah.
And then, I see that theory in the flesh of your text and how beautiful that is, and how the reason why I think academia pushes so hard against it, because I think they see the power in it. It's just so powerful to hear you talk about that. Obviously I know that, your relationship to your family and your mother is underlying all of it, but to hear how you're processing, and it reminds me, Kelly, actually, I was thinking about you and your mother. So I'm listening to you talk about your thing.
Absolutely.
And what Kelly's mother did in Oakland, California, for the sending Kelly to some crazy expensive school in New England. And it just, there's so many connection points, intersectional points. And so, I just had to say that. But I want to talk a second in the text about this idea of rhetorical intersectionality. I know you have a doctorate in rhetoric, in rhetorics.
Yes.
Is that what it is?
Yep.
Okay. Which is fascinating. There's not that many Black people who do study in this space. And so when I see it, I'm always fascinated, because I not only is the work hard, but navigating being the one of only still in 2020, whatever, in these spaces is fascinating. But I'd love to hear more about reclaiming rhetorical intersectionality. Can you talk about what that is, and like can you share the moment or an experience? I mean, you kind of talked about it, but maybe a particular moment that led you to need to move towards this reclamation, right, of rhetorical intersectionality.
Wow. Yes. And let me just say, like, I want to say, like, hearing you talk about Kelly's mom doing that, like, it just gave me this affirmation, right, that I didn't even know I needed on today. But yeah, it's a special experience to realize, like, oh, this was the idea. Like, the three of us would be having a conversation like this.
Yeah.
Do you notice, before you move on, you notice Dr. Walker, whether she wants to be admitted or not, she's a little churchy too. Because she said on today.
I am.
Oh, you know, that just cracked me up. That's it for part 1 of our conversation with Dr. Tahirah Walker. I hope you're feeling as full as we are after that one. Next episode, we'll be back with part 2, where we go deeper into her new book, exploring rhetorical intersectionality, joy as resistance, and what it means to live enough for the city. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And as always, thank you for listening to This Womanist Work. Peace.